So it was not until when I was 20 years of age, when the Lord graciously called me into the work of the ministry. And it's now been 18 years ever since the Lord called me into ministry. And during this time, the Lord has been so gracious in that He has allowed me to experience ministry in different contexts, in different parts of the world. I've had the opportunity to experience ministry in the continent of Africa, in Europe, and of course here in America. By the special grace of God, I have experienced ministry in quite a few nations in Africa in different capacities. And in Europe, I've had the privilege of experiencing ministry in some of the major nations in Europe, such as the United Kingdom, such as France, such as Germany, such as the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, which is where I met my wife. That's where I met Lena for the first time. And I met her in a small city between Brussels and Antwerp called Mechelen. And that's where we first met. And 4 years after, we got married. And so the Lord has given, I'm thankful for the experience that I've had in viewing ministry from a European perspective. And of course, here in the United States, it has pleased the Lord to let me do ministry here for the past 8 years. And so I am very thankful because these experiences have shaped my perspective in different ways. And I have viewed ministry in different contexts and experienced ministry in different contexts. Now, based on my experiences, if I were to share my thoughts on how I see the church, how I see ministry, especially in the Western world, and how I see ministry in Africa, based on the areas where I have been involved in, I would say it seemed to me that the Western church, or Christians in the Western world, have a similar mindset like the Gentiles in the days of the Apostle Paul. A similar mindset that was focused on wisdom, eloquence, human wisdom to be precise, and not so much on the gospel of Christ or the gospel of the cross. And it seemed to me that based on my experience, the church in Africa, or Christians in Africa, have a similar mindset like the Jews in the days of the Apostle Paul. The Jews were more concerned with miracles, signs, and wonders than they were about the gospel message of the cross. In fact, in my opinion, the quest for miracles in Africa has become the existential rationale for doing ministry. And if you cannot perform miracles, then you are not valued as an important minister. During my early formative years in ministry, an elderly man sat me down to give me some advice, and he told me, he said, "Pastor, if you want to be a successful minister of the gospel, then pray that God should give you the ability to perform miracles. Because if you don't perform miracles in this our context, no one will take you seriously." And unfortunately, he was right. Because several years later, when I was involved at that time in my life, and the Lord was using me in international itinerant preaching ministry, and I was moving from one church to another, preaching the gospel all over. And I was in this major city in Africa, and the Lord gave me the opportunity to minister in this church. I preached the gospel, and the people were blessed. And the preacher, the host there, was very blessed and very encouraged by my ministry. And he said, I can't just let you go. I want other churches to also be blessed by your ministry. And so he picked up his phone and he called a fellow minister and said, in his own words, he said, I have a preaching machine here from Cameroon. And he said, I want him to come and minister in your church as well. You will be blessed as we were blessed. And so this other preacher said, yes, that's fine, let him come. So they did a program for me. They did all flyers and, notified the community that a preacher from Cameroon is coming. Come and you will be blessed. And they did all that publicity. And so I traveled to this city where this other church was, and I was amazed at the reception. They received me as if I was a king. Highly honored, placed me in a wonderful hotel, assigned a driver for me in a Mercedes Benz, and I was like, wow. And after everything, the pastor came and met me and said, are you ready? I said, yes. Are you ready to bless the people? I said, yes, I'm ready to preach the word. And the man said, well, yes, the word, it's good to preach the word, but I'm really hoping that the Lord will use you to perform miracles tonight. And then I said, well, but when I preach the word, people will be blessed, and that is the greatest miracle, to receive the word and be transformed by it. The man said, and he laughed and he said, well, you are a young man in ministry. He said, I have been in ministry for a long time, man of God, and I can tell you that good preaching doesn't pay. In order for you to succeed in ministry, you must do more than just preach the truth. You have to perform miracles. And so I'm hoping that God will use you tonight to perform miracles so people can give. We've spent a lot of money. We put you in a very beautiful hotel. We've assigned a car for you and all of that. If you perform miracle, people will be blessed. And people will give and they will have money. Well, needless to say, I preached the gospel, and that was not good enough for that minister, which is why I was not invited the second time there. Well, the point is that there is indeed a problem. It seemed to me that so many ministers in this 21st century are under pressure, whether in the West or in the East. There are certain expectations from people, and the ministers are forced to meet these expectations, which is why for ministers who are ministering, some ministers, not all, some ministers who are ministering in the West, where there is this Gentile mentality, the need for eloquent speech, philosophical reasoning, human wisdom, and so preachers are forced to get out of their way just to please the ungodly desires of their followers. Which is why when I look around, I see some preachers read from the Bible, but preach from the newspaper. In other words, messages that are not centered on the cross, messages that are not centered on Christ, but messages that are influenced by what is going on, what is trending on social media, or what is trending in politics, or on some of the debates in society. If you are a minister and you don't approach ministry from that perspective, then people won't take you seriously. And so you tend to be an eloquent speaker just to satisfy the desires of the people, sharing your human wisdom on some of the burning issues in society. Because of this problem, we see churches in Africa, the same thing. Under pressure. If you are doing ministry in a context where people won't take you seriously until you perform miracles and signs and wonders, you are under pressure to do that, to establish your relevance. Which is why you find many pastors play mind games. manipulate the intellect of people to give them a false sense of hope about miracles. And some actually do perform miracles, but most often they have sold their soul to the devil in exchange of power. If you read the news, especially in the church in Africa, you find pastors who are guilty of killing or ritual activities to gain power because they understand they need that power. They need that ability to perform miracles to establish their relevance. And some may not be involved in mind games, may not be involved in satanic activities, but their focus with God is more towards receiving power from God so they can perform miracles. So they spend hours and hours praying. They spend days and nights fasting, not because of their love for God, not because they love God and want to be in His presence, but because they understand that the longer I pray, the longer I fast, I'll receive spiritual powers to perform signs and wonders that people may affirm me as a great man of God. And we have this problem going on around the world. I remember at one point in my ministry, I had a prayer buddy. And we usually spend time praying, and he's a good minister of the gospel, and all he has been doing, like me, we preach the gospel. But somehow this desire to be more, to be accepted by the society got into him. And one day I met him praying. We were supposed to pray, and he was early, and he began praying. And I stepped in, and I was just waiting for him to pray. And he started praying, and he said, Lord, I'm sick and I'm tired of doing dry ministry. I'm sick and I'm tired of doing ministry where I don't see people being healed, or I don't see people falling when I pray. So right now, he lifted up his hand and said, right now, give me power. Put power in my hands, so that from today onward, when I get out and pray, I lay my hand on someone and pray, that person must fall down, so they will see that I'm a strong man of God. Give me power, so that when I preach and I make my hand like this, people will fall this way. And I make my hand like this, people, he was praying that prayer. And we have people who, because of these expectations from the people, they go to God day and night and cry, God, give me power so I can perform miracle, that people may know that I'm a great man of God. Oh, there is a problem in the church. There is a problem because not only is it bad that people expect signs and wonders for them to believe, or that people expect eloquent speech before they believe. The area which is of great importance is the fact that some ministers are getting out of their way to satisfy the desires of the people. Paul said a time is going to come when men will no longer stand sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will look for themselves preachers to suit their desires. So for those who are in the Western world, they will look for the smartest preachers who are articulate in expressing their views on political or social or whatever concerns. In Africa, they will look for preachers who are able to say miracle and perform signs and wonders. You see, the real problem here is that by doing these things, we are ridding the cross of its power. The cross is being emptied of its power. And when the cross becomes powerless, the cross that is the symbol of our faith, when it becomes powerless, because ministers of the gospel focus on signs and wonders, or on human wisdom and philosophies, the result is that the church will lose its impact in the society. And when the church loses its impact in the society, the church might be spreading exponentially, but there will be no depths in the church. Which is why someone has rightfully described the church as several miles wide, but only 1 inch deep when it comes to solid biblical doctrine. Do you know why? Because preachers, there is this desire, there is this craving from the pulpit to satisfy the desires of the flesh by either supplying human wisdom and human philosophies or performing signs and wonders that may grow the church, that may expand the church, but there is no quality, there is no doctrine, there is no depth, there is no message of the cross in the church, which is why you find the church everywhere, but there is so little Christ-likeness on the streets. Because the church is not being groomed and formed by the words of Christ, by the message of the cross. Beloved, if we must grow as a church, if we must be revived as a church in this community, then we must not be like the Jews who go after signs and wonders. We must not be like the Gentiles who are after human wisdom or eloquence or philosophies. We must be focused on the truth of Christ. We must be focused on the message of the cross. We must focus on the real power of God. The real power of God. And contrary to what some think, the real power of God is not displayed through the dispensing of human wisdom and philosophies. You don't display the real power of God through the performing of miracles and signs and wonders. The Apostle Paul teaches us in our text this morning what the real power of God is. And so this morning I'm going to be majoring on what Paul teaches on this subject to lead us as a church in the right direction. Hence the title of the sermon this morning, Christ, the power and wisdom of God. Jesus Christ must be the power we seek. Jesus Christ must be the power we have. Jesus Christ and the message of the cross must be the power that we should boast of if we must grow as a church which has quality, which has depths, which has substance, which is solid in doctrine. Christ must be